Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Thank you for tuning in to our Calibration Point podcast today. I'm excited to have a long-term friend, good friend, Lane Siesky, who's the managing partner with Siesky Law. And he is a 21-plus year trial litigator and attorney who just in conversation really spurred some interesting discussion about the impact of persuasive communication and thought it would be fascinating to give him the ability to create a session for us to explore what he's learned as a litigator and an attorney that we in the nonprofit field need to understand about how we communicate with board members, with donors, with staff, with volunteers, with community partners, and believe that everyone's going to find that Lane has a lot of fascinating things to offer and some unique perspectives that will apply into how we build relationships in our organizations. So with that, Lane, thank you for being here. And if you could just maybe share, when you think of persuasive communication, especially as it relates to the nonprofit world, which you serve on boards and work with a lot of different individuals, and you're a donor, let alone in your practice litigating law and helping individuals. What sticks out to you? What has really struck you about what you've learned in your time as an attorney?
Yeah, Jamie, thank you first for having me. And I've learned a lot, and I would say that big picture wise, what I've learned over time is that the key to persuasion in communication is kind of putting the work in ahead of time. You have to understand who your audience is, why they should care about what you have to say, and you need to spend some time thinking about what it is you're trying to accomplish. What do you want them to do? What's the call to action? What are you wanting them to take away from it? And then, give some thought to how you measure that success. Was this communication successful or was it not? And so, kind of from a big picture standpoint, it's those things. Who's the audience? What are you trying to accomplish? And why should they care? Why is this important to them?
Based on just those elements, pretty well every fundraising program in the country can have a positive impact. What you've identified as one of the biggest challenges, as you're well aware of, in the nonprofit community, how do we make the case understand who we're communicating with, and then how do we translate and connect with them? So, based on that, what does that look like, Lane? What do you see in interpersonal communication? You communicate with so many different kinds of constituencies. How do we take that into practice?
Yes. So communication in our world varies. So you can have written communication, whether that's a motion or a brief, where you're trying to persuade a judge, perhaps the other attorney, your point of view. You can be verbally arguing or educating to a judge or to your client, or you can be where you're speaking to an audience, whether it's a jury or a group of people. And so each of those situations is a little different. And I've found over time, really putting the time in ahead of time to research your audience, understand, just because you're a good one-on-one communicator does not necessarily mean that you're going to be good in front of a group of people. It's kind of a different skill set. And so some of the things we've done in law, we've done focus groups, mock jury trials where, you present the case and you sit back and listen and watch to the mock jurors to see what they think is important. how they react to the way you framed issues or you present the evidence. And I think in general, I think that more time needs to be given by people who are trying to persuade an audience to the research and the preparation, because I think the better you understand your audience, the better you're able to frame and connect with them, and thereby you're going to have the best percentage or chance of persuading them.
I love the idea, and I know obviously you're bringing it up because you believe it impacts how we cultivate relationships as well. But a mock um, trial, a mock jury has such application in getting us in the nonprofit sector to bring together small groups of donors and share our case and get their reaction.
Yes. And I think it's important. What I've learned is that, I may be passionate about a topic, really feel strongly about it. And I may feel like, okay, we're on the good side of things, and this is a great cause that we're trying to champion. But the reality is, that's probably, in my opinion, not the most important thing. The most important thing is the audience and what do they feel strongly about, and why should they care? Just because you're passionate or you feel it's a good cause does not necessarily mean it's going to resonate with them or make them um, do the call of action, And so paying attention to what motivates them. Another thing that we've done, if you're arguing to a judge, you want to understand that judge's preferences or biases or their precedent, how have they ruled in the past.
Hmm.
And so, in looking at a group of volunteers or donors in the nonprofit world, again, the better you understand the audience, the better the chance you have of framing the material, the subject matter, so that it's well received by them and it resonates with what matters to them, because that's the key. If you connect with what they're passionate about, with what resonates with them, then you can get the call to action. Then you can get them to do what it is you're trying to persuade them to do.
It's a really good perspective, and to think about again the direct application in the nonprofit world in not just having a mock trial, but bringing people together and studying them and listening and learning what it is that's resonating, why it's resonating. I'm guessing that whenever you're doing a mock trial, that you're also watching nonverbal language as well.
Yes, nonverbal language. Like let me give you some examples. We have tried medical malpractice cases where the opposing attorney has stood up, and each time he addresses the jury, the first thing he says is that our client is a smoker. Okay.
Hmm.
And that really has nothing to do with the legal issues in the case. But what that tells me was that that attorney or the insurance company had researched and found that if they could communicate that our client was a smoker over and over and over again, that they felt like, or scientifically they felt, that that would either decrease our chances of winning or bring down the jury verdict if we did win.
Wow.
And that's not something that's intuitive. And so, the art of communication is very much a skill. It's an art that has to be cultivated and worked at, but there is science behind it too. And I think more time needs to be spent in preparing the message so that it's well received. We kind of talk about the 3 R's: the receiving of the information, the recording of it by the audience, and then being able to retrieve it.
Mm.
So, how many times have we been, maybe in a church service on Sunday where you walk out and you feel good, it was a great message, but 2 days later, you can't remember what the message was about.
Right.
And so, there needs to be a lot of preparation. Like if you're communicating something, you need to think about how much is too much information.
Hmm.
It's better to communicate 1 or 2 or 3 points than it is to overwhelm someone who agrees with you on everything and then walks out and a week later can't remember what it was that you really were trying to communicate.
Right. It's a really good point. So those 3 R's: receive, record, and retrieve. And
Yes.
spending a lot of time on preparation around the audience. And again, I'm really fascinated with the connection and your example of the opposing attorney pulling out that a client was a smoker. And I just, what's going through my mind, Lane, is I'm thinking about, okay, so what if, as organizations, we spent a lot more time going deep and really understanding, which is what we want, obviously, the relationships that we have, to the point that we're really beginning to be a student of the people who care about us and how much those things would change. And then to your point, it's one thing for me to understand someone, but I have to then also know how to read and really translate what it is that I'm learning about them into a productive relationship, whatever success looks like. Is that accurate?
And so, yes. And so people are different. Different people are different. Some are audio, they learn by listening and hearing. Some people are visual learners. They hear what you're saying, but they remember a picture much better. Some are more tactile, where they want to touch and feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you communicate, I think it's good to have all three, the audio, the visual, and the tactile, as part of the communication.
Yeah.
So that you're reaching as many people in that targeted audience as possible. The other thing we say a lot of times in briefing, maybe you turn in a 15-page brief to the judge, but when I'm reviewing work, of an attorney, or if I'm reviewing my own work, within that first page, I better communicate to the judge why we should win. If the judge is having to read 12 pages before he or she gets to why we should win, then we probably have lost. And so with an audience like today, you want people to understand why should they care?
Right.
Why should they care what Jamie or Lane has to say? And if we haven't answered that, and quickly, you're going to lose that audience.
Right. I think, Lane, you have definitely answered why we should care today, and the understanding that if we can connect at a deeper, more intimate level, people will become advocates for our cause, and we're actually equipping them to do so. And you've given us a lot to think about, some things that I have never pondered. And I'll take away the 3 R's and the idea, especially around once we've done the research, but how do we validate that research? And I love the idea of doing mock trials. Again, translating that into our world. Wow, I could do mock settings with donors and volunteers to really test my message and study them and really watch.
Absolutely. Communicate it to a group of people, and then bring that group back a week later and ask them what it was you had talked about.
Yeah.
And see if they can remember it. And I think you'll find when you put the information in a way that they can receive it, that they can record it in their mind and then retrieve it, you're going to find that message not only resonates, but stays with them longer. So acronyms are a great way to do that. Visuals. Today, the 3 R's,
right?
Receive, record, and retrieve. Anything like that, because that's the way we learned in school, right?
Yep.
For tests, you would have acronyms to help you remember, memory pegs, and all of that needs to be incorporated into communication.
Excellent thoughts, Lane. I think you've given us some really good information that we can take into practice. I hope everybody enjoyed our time with Lane. Lane, very thankful for you giving us the time to share your wisdom and your experience, and how great that you see that what you've learned and the skill and the art that you've developed is able to translate into the nonprofit world and help leaders in so many different ways. So we thank you for that, and hope you have a great afternoon, Lane.
Well, I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.